Today I'm starting a new video series called Scariest Things Police Have Seen, Part 1. Officers were dispatched to a call about a burglary in progress. The homeowner was in the kitchen and heard running upstairs. Officers arrived and set up a perimeter around the house. A canine officer gave several warnings saying that they were going to let a canine loose. Just as he gave the command, a perimeter officer saw a hand pull the curtain back on the top floor and relayed the information over the radio. The canine officer sent the dog in, and sure enough, no one was found. The perimeter officer was 100% certain of what he saw, and the homeowner was sure he heard running upstairs. Scariest Things Police Have Seen, Part 2. A police department started receiving calls from a vacant house twice a night for almost a week. The voice on the phone sounded like an elderly lady with Alzheimer's, barely audible, saying, please help, with coughing. The voice on the phone was totally unresponsive to dispatch's questions. Every time police went to the house, there was no one there. A records check showed that the previous owner of the house was a woman taking care of her elderly mother who was dying of lung cancer. Scariest Things Police Have Seen, Part 3. A deputy who worked a backwoods county area stopped his vehicle because he had to go to the bathroom. The nearest bathroom was 30 minutes away, so he decided to stop on the side of the road. The deputy had this unnerving feeling like someone was watching him. He looked around, and about 20 feet from his patrol vehicle, he saw a shadowy figure standing there watching him. The deputy stopped, zipped up, and started questioning the figure, who did not respond at all. The deputy was scared that it might be an ambush, so he ordered the figure to show him his hands. Finally, the deputy pulled out a flashlight and aimed it right at the figure, who disappeared. The deputy could hear no movement, no rustling in the bushes, nothing. The deputy jumped back in his patrol vehicle, took one look back, and saw the creature there again, this time approaching him. So he took off. Scariest Things Police Have Seen, Part 4. About 20 years ago, several officers responded to an alarm call at an old PTA building in Austin, Texas. They found an unsecured door on one side of the property. The youngest officer posted himself there while the other officer went to search the property. The officer was staring right at the door when all of a sudden the alarm sounded again and the door slammed shut right in his face. The senior officer ran right back over to his position and asked why he slammed the door. The youngest officer said, "I didn't." The officers requested assistance from a canine unit. The dog searched the building and found nothing. Even though the dog was acting hinky like someone was in the building, it never picked up a scent. Finally, a key holder showed up. The officers told him what happened and he said, "Well, you know the place is haunted, right?" He told them there was a secretary that used to work there for 30 years, and after she died, there were reports she kept showing up for work. Scariest Things Police Have Seen, Part 5. Now this one's from a 911 dispatcher. She got a call from a family saying their teenage daughter was possessed. The dispatcher assumed it might be a mental health issue or possibly drug-related, but the family assured her she had no history of anything like that. The family members were holding her down, and over the phone, the dispatcher could hear two people yelling at each other. The dispatcher asked the family to tell whoever was yelling at her to stop. The family replied, "It's her." The dispatcher said, "I know it's her. Get whoever's yelling at her to stop." The family replied, "It's her. Both voices." The dispatcher couldn't really explain it, but she could definitely tell she was listening to a young girl's voice with an adult male yelling back. In this situation, do not call 911, call a Catholic priest. Scariest Things Police Have Seen, Part 6. One evening, several officers brought in a combative subject who was arrested for domestic violence. As they were bringing him into holding, they walked past cell number 1. The officers didn't pay much attention to him, but there was a guy standing in the cell. He looked normal, there was nothing really out of the ordinary about him. Later on in the shift, the officer was asked by a sergeant to do a head count before transporting the prisoners to county jail. The officer started with cell 1 and found it was empty. Everyone started to panic because they thought they lost a prisoner. They went over all the paperwork and found no one was ever placed in cell 1. The officers went to check video surveillance and found that sure enough, indeed, there was someone standing in cell 1. But the creepy thing was, as soon as the officers walked by the cell door, he just blinks out of existence. The officers tried to put this evidence of paranormal activity on a DVD or USB drive, but the footage didn't show up. Scariest Things Police Have Seen, Part 7. At around 2 a.m., a young officer returned back to the patrol station because she was coming off shift. At that time of night, the station was usually empty. As she was walking towards the locker room, she walked by an empty admin area. She saw an older male officer that she didn't recognize, so she greeted him. He ignored her, and as she looked over her shoulder, she noticed he was gone. She was creeped out, but she just told herself she was imagining things. A couple of days went by, and she saw the picture of the same officer she saw that night on the wall of fallen officers. The officer had killed himself several years before. Scariest Things Police Have Seen, Part 8. This one comes to us from Espanola, New Mexico, and just so you know, it has video. Late at night, an officer was watching surveillance cameras at the station, and this is what he saw. A figure walks through the sally port of the station parking lot. He checked and the sally port door never opened, and he couldn't find anyone in the parking lot. Scariest things police have seen, Part 9. About 10 years ago, a couple repeatedly called police about hearing footsteps in their home in Imperial, Missouri. The responding officer had been there twice and found nothing, and figured the third time would be just the same. When he got there, he found an open sliding glass door, and something had set off the motion light. The officer looked all around the outside of the house and couldn't find any footprints in the snow that would have caused the motion light to be set off. As he interviewed the couple as to what happened, he heard creaking in the floorboards upstairs like someone was walking on them. He looked around again and couldn't find anything. The officer said, out of his 27 years of policing, it was the creepiest thing he had ever experienced. Scariest things police have seen, Part 10. This is an audio recording from 1981 by a police officer who saw a UFO. Listen for yourself.
Yeah, see, that's all it is now. It's just an orange glow. That's all I can see. Just an orange glow. Because the sun is coming up. Better not be. It's awful early. Early for the sun paper, Joe. I don't think the sun would just be in that one spot. It goes up to a higher vantage point, so you tell us what it does. Listen.